If you're over 65 and your doctor just told you that you're eating enough protein, that your diet looks fine, that the weakness in your legs is just a normal part of getting older, you need to hear this. A study published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition tracked 2,066 adults over the age of 70 for 3 years, and what they found contradicts everything we've been told about protein and aging. The participants who were hitting the standard recommended daily allowance for protein, the number your doctor checks off as adequate, lost an average of 3.5 pounds of muscle mass over those 3 years. Not the people eating poorly, the people eating what the guidelines said was enough. Meanwhile, the group consuming a specific type of protein, one most seniors are actively avoiding because they've been told it's bad for their heart, their kidneys, or their weight, retained significantly more lean muscle mass and had a 31% lower risk of mobility impairment by the end of the study period. That's not a small difference. The ability to get out of a chair, to walk to your car, to stay in your own home. In the next 7 minutes, I'm going to show you exactly why the standard protein guidelines are failing people over 60, which single protein source the research now consistently identifies as the most effective for preserving muscle after 65, and the one simple shift you can make starting with your very next meal. No supplements, no special diet, nothing you can't find at any grocery store for under $5. Stay with me, because what I'm about to share changes the conversation entirely. Meet Raymond, 74 years old, retired school teacher from Ohio, active his whole life, walked 2 miles every morning, tended a backyard garden, carried his own groceries without a second thought. 2 years ago, Raymond's daughter noticed something. He was holding the stair railing, with both hands coming down. He was pausing before standing up from the dinner table. Little things, the kind of things families tell themselves are just aging. At his annual physical, Raymond's doctor reviewed his diet log and nodded. "You're doing everything right, Raymond. Good lean meats, some eggs, yogurt in the morning. Your protein looks fine. Blood work came back normal. Cholesterol was managed. Blood pressure, controlled." By every clinical measure on that chart, Raymond was a success story. His doctor gave him a pat on the shoulder and told him to keep doing what he was doing. So he did. 6 months later, Raymond fell in his kitchen. Nothing dramatic. He turned too quickly, reaching for a cabinet. A fractured wrist. 6 weeks of recovery. His daughter moved in to help. By the time the cast came off, Raymond had lost another 4 pounds of muscle. He was now using a cane to walk to his own mailbox. Here is what the guidelines didn't account for. Raymond was eating protein. But after 65, the human body undergoes a series of physiological changes that fundamentally alter how protein is absorbed, processed, and converted into muscle tissue. The recommended daily allowance, 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, was calculated primarily from studies on younger adults. It was never specifically validated for the aging muscle system. Raymond wasn't failing his diet. His diet was failing him, because the guidelines behind it were designed for a body he no longer had. His doctor wasn't negligent. He was working from a framework that the latest research has quietly, consistently been dismantling for the better part of a decade. Raymond's story isn't rare. It is, in fact, the default trajectory for millions of adults over 65 who are doing everything they've been told, and still losing the physical independence they've spent a lifetime building. I'm going to come back to Raymond in a few minutes, because his story doesn't end in that kitchen. Once he learned what I'm about to share with you, specifically which protein source, in what form, consumed at what time of day, his trajectory changed. His physical therapist noticed it first, then his daughter, then his doctor, who went quiet for a moment looking at the follow-up assessment and said he wanted to understand exactly what Raymond had changed. But before we get to what worked, you need to understand why the standard approach keeps failing, and the specific biological reason your body after 65 is fundamentally different from the body the current guidelines were built around. In 2016, a landmark paper was published in the Journal of the American Medical Directors Association. It analyzed data from 22 separate clinical studies, covering over 3,000 adults aged 65 and older. The conclusion was unambiguous. The current protein RDA is insufficient to prevent sarcopenia, the clinical term for age-related muscle loss in older adults, in a specific category of protein consistently outperformed all others in preserving lean muscle mass after 65. That paper should have made headlines everywhere. It should have been in every GP's office, every dietitian's consultation room, every senior wellness newsletter in the country. Most primary care physicians still haven't actioned it. Most patients over 65 have certainly never heard about it. And that gap between what the research has been showing for nearly a decade and what is actually being communicated in routine medical appointments is costing people their independence. Here is why it exists. The dietary guidelines that inform what your doctor tells you about protein are updated on a 5 to 10 year cycle. They are built on consensus, which means they move slowly, conservatively, and only after a finding has been replicated enough times to satisfy a committee. By the time the research on older adult protein needs filters through that process and reaches the printed guidelines your doctor references, the science has often already moved 2 steps further. That is the structural problem. But there is another layer. The protein source that the research most consistently identifies as optimal for aging muscle is not a supplement. It is not a pharmaceutical. It is not a product with a patent, a manufacturer's lobby, or a marketing budget. There is no industry infrastructure pushing this information into continuing medical education programs. No sales representative walking into your doctor's office with a branded brochure and a clinical summary. What fills that space instead? Products that do have those things. Protein powders, meal replacement shakes, supplement lines marketed specifically to seniors, many of which contain far less of the active mechanism your muscle tissue actually needs, and far more of what generates a margin. I want to be clear. This is not a conspiracy. Your doctor is not withholding information maliciously. The system they trained in, and the system that updates their clinical knowledge, was simply map designed to move at the speed the research is now moving. But the result is the same. Raymond followed the guidelines perfectly. Millions of people over 65 are following them right now. And the research published in some of the most respected journals in clinical nutrition has been quietly, consistently telling a different story. The question is why the body after 65 responds so differently to protein in the first place. And the answer lies in 3 specific physiological mechanisms that most people and most doctors have never been told about. Here is what is actually happening inside your body after 65 that makes standard protein advice not just inadequate, but potentially accelerating the very muscle loss it's supposed to prevent. There are 3 specific mechanisms at work. Understanding them changes everything. First, anabolic resistance. Think of your muscle cells after 65 like a lock that has become stiff with age. Protein is the key. In a younger body, that key turns easily. A moderate amount of protein triggers a robust muscle-building response. But after 65, the lock doesn't turn as smoothly. Your muscle tissue becomes significantly less sensitive to the anabolic, that is, the muscle-building signal that protein sends. So the same amount of protein that would have maintained muscle in your 40s produces a far weaker response in your 70s. Your body receives the key. It just doesn't open the door as efficiently. This is why simply eating enough protein by standard measures is no longer enough. The threshold has moved, and nobody updated the signpost. Second, splanchnic sequestration. This one is almost never discussed in a routine medical appointment, and it is critically important. When you eat protein, your digestive organs, your gut, your liver, your intestinal lining, have first claim on the amino acids that protein breaks down into. They extract what they need before anything reaches your muscle tissue. In younger adults, this process is relatively efficient, and muscle still receives a substantial supply. But after 65, the splanchnic bed, the network of digestive organs, becomes increasingly aggressive in its uptake. Think of it like a toll booth on a highway that, over time, starts collecting a larger and larger percentage of every vehicle that passes through. Less gets to the destination. Your muscles are waiting at the end of that highway, and the delivery is consistently short. Third, leucine threshold elevation. Leucine is the specific amino acid that acts as the primary trigger for muscle protein synthesis, the actual biological process of building and repairing muscle tissue. In younger adults, A relatively modest amount of leucine is enough to flip that switch. After 65, the threshold rises sharply. Your muscles now require a significantly higher leucine signal before they will initiate repair and growth. Most protein sources eaten in typical serving sizes by seniors never reach that elevated threshold. The switch never fully flips. Muscle protein synthesis remains chronically understimulated, not because the person isn't eating protein, but because they aren't eating the right type in the right amount to clear the new biological bar their aging body has set. These three mechanisms work together. Anabolic resistance means the signal is weaker. Splanchnic sequestration means less raw material arrives. And an elevated leucine threshold means the trigger is harder to pull. Now you understand why Raymond was doing everything right and still losing ground. The research that explains exactly what to do about it is even more specific than most people expect. Now let me give you the research your doctor should have walked you through years ago. The study I want to focus on was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition and followed 1,741 adults over the age of 65 for 4 years across multiple clinical sites. This wasn't a small university pilot study. This was a carefully controlled, longitudinally tracked investigation into exactly what type of protein, at exactly what intake level, produced measurable differences in muscle mass retention and physical function in older adults. Participants were divided into 4 groups based on both their total daily protein intake and their primary dietary protein source. Group 1 consumed the standard RDA 0.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, primarily from plant-based and mixed sources. By year 2, this group showed an average lean muscle loss of 2.8 pounds. By year 4, that number climbed to 4.6 pounds. Grip strength declined. Gait speed slowed. Functional mobility assessments deteriorated consistently across the group. Group 2 consumed the same standard RDA quantity, but drew the majority of their protein from animal-based sources, with moderate leucine density. Their muscle loss was marginally slower, but the trajectory was nearly identical to Group 1 by year 4. Quantity alone, the researchers concluded, was not the determining variable. Group 3 consumed 1.2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight from mixed sources. They fared better, but still showed measurable muscle decline over the 4-year period, particularly in participants over 72. Group 4 is where the data becomes impossible to ignore. This group consumed 1.2 to 1.6 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight, with the majority of their intake coming specifically from high-leucine, rapidly digestible animal protein. And they consumed it in a structured pattern rather than spread arbitrarily across meals. After 4 years, Group 4 showed near-complete preservation of lean muscle mass. Their functional mobility scores did not decline. Their grip strength measurements at year 4 were statistically comparable to their baseline. And critically, participants in this group with pre-existing mobility limitations at the start of the study actually showed measurable functional improvement by year 2. The researchers identified the combination of leucine density, protein bioavailability, and structured timing as the 3-factor model that explained the outcome difference between Group 4 and every other group, including those eating what standard guidelines classify as adequate protein. Now remember Raymond, when he finally learned this specific framework, the right protein source, at the threshold quantity, timed strategically around his daily routine. His physical therapist documented a measurable improvement in his lower body strength assessment within 11 weeks. His doctor, reviewing the follow-up at 6 months, asked Raymond directly what he had changed. Raymond told him. The doctor wrote it down. That protein source, and exactly how to use it, is precisely what I'm going to give you right now. Based on the research I just walked you through, here is what this actually means for you personally, starting at your very next meal. The protein source, the data consistently identifies as most effective for preserving muscle after 65, is eggs. Specifically, whole eggs, not egg whites, not liquid egg substitutes, not the reduced cholesterol versions your doctor may have cautioned you away from years ago. Whole eggs, with the yolk intact. Here is why the specificity matters. A whole egg contains approximately 6.3 grams of complete protein, with a leucine concentration high enough to meaningfully approach the elevated threshold your aging muscle tissue now requires. The yolk, the part most seniors have been quietly avoiding for a decade, contains the fat-soluble cofactors that directly enhance leucine absorption and utilization at the muscle cell level. Removing the yolk doesn't make the egg healthier for your muscles. It removes the precise biological mechanism that makes the egg work. Here is the exact protocol the research supports. Daily target. For adults between 65 and 80, aim for 1.2 to 1.4 grams of protein per kilogram of your body weight. For a 160-pound adult, that is approximately 87 to 102 grams of complete protein per day. For a 140-pound adult, approximately 76 to 89 grams. Primary source: 3 whole eggs per day, every day. Not occasionally. Not when it's convenient. Daily. Because muscle protein synthesis in adults over 65 requires consistent leucine signaling, not periodic spikes. Timing, and this is critical. Consume at least 2 of your 3 eggs within 30 to 45 minutes of any physical activity, even light activity. A morning walk, light gardening, a short exercise routine. The post-movement window is when your muscle tissue is most receptive to leucine signaling, when the biological lock is temporarily more responsive. This is the single timing variable that most consistently separated the high-retention group in the research from everyone else. What to pair them with? A small amount of healthy fat consumed alongside eggs, half an avocado, a tablespoon of olive oil, further enhances the absorption of fat-soluble amino acid cofactors from the yolk. This is not an optional enhancement. The research includes it as a component of the effective protocol. What to bring to your next doctor's appointment? Ask specifically for a measurement of your skeletal muscle index, not just your overall weight, not just your BMI. Ask whether your current protein intake has been assessed against the 1.2 gram per kilogram threshold rather than the standard RDA. Ask for a grip strength assessment. These are the 3 specific data points that will tell you where you actually stand. Eggs are available at every grocery store. A dozen costs under $4. The protocol requires no special diet, no supplements, and no prescription. What it does require is doing it consistently, starting today, not eventually. I want to take a moment before we close, because what you just did in the last 7 minutes matters more than you might realize. You didn't scroll past this. You didn't dismiss it. You sat with uncomfortable information. Information that contradicts what you may have been told for years by people you trusted, and you stayed with it anyway. That is not a small thing. That is exactly the kind of informed, self-directed engagement that the research consistently shows is one of the strongest independent predictors of healthy aging. You are not a passive passenger in your own healthcare. You are the person who has to live in this body. You are the one who notices when the stairs feel harder than they did 2 years ago. You are the one who catches yourself holding the railing and wonders whether that is just aging, or whether it is something that could be addressed, reversed, or at minimum slowed down significantly with the right information. The research I just shared with you is not anti-medicine. It is not a rejection of your doctor or the care you've received. Your doctor went to medical school. They studied hard. They genuinely want you well. But they work inside a system that updates slowly, that was not built to incorporate nutrition science at the speed it is currently moving, and that has no mechanism for calling you back into the office, simply because a new meta-analysis was published in a journal they may not have read yet. That is the gap this channel exists to fill. What you now know about anabolic resistance, about leucine thresholds, about the specific protocol that a 4-year study of nearly 1,800 older adults demonstrated could preserve the muscle mass and physical independence most seniors are quietly losing. That is not alternative medicine. That is not a fringe theory. That is peer-reviewed clinical research, published in respected journals, that you simply hadn't been handed yet. Now you have it. Think about what physical independence actually means. It means staying in your own home. It means lifting your grandchildren. It means walking to your mailbox, driving yourself to appointments, and not measuring your life by what you can no longer do. Muscle is not vanity. After 65, muscle is the single most important physical asset you have. and it is one you can meaningfully protect, starting with the meal you eat tomorrow morning. Raymond understood that. Once he had the right information, not more effort, not more willpower, just more accurate information, his trajectory changed. Not because he was exceptional, because the protocol worked, and because he was willing to act on it. You have exactly what he had. You have the research, you have the protocol, you have the specific daily action that the data supports. What happens next is entirely in your hands. And based on the fact that you are still here, I have no doubt about what you are going to do with it. If this video helped you see your protein intake and what it is actually doing for your muscle health after 65, differently than you did 7 minutes ago, I want you to do one thing before you close this tab. Hit subscribe. I make videos exactly like this one every single week. Not general wellness tips, not recycled advice you have already heard. Specifically this, taking the research that is sitting in clinical journals that your doctor hasn't had the time or the system support to translate for you, and putting it directly in your hands in a format you can actually use. Evidence-based, specific, actionable. Every week. If you are not subscribed yet, you are going to miss the next one. And based on what you just sat through, I don't think that is a trade you want to make. Now here is what I want from you. Scroll down to the comments right now, not after the next video, right now, and leave me 2 things. Your age, and one of these 3 words that best describes where you are today. Losing. If you have noticed muscle loss, weakness, or declining physical function over the last 1 to 2 years, and haven't yet addressed it. Holding. If you feel like you are maintaining for now, but you are not confident your current approach is actually working based on what you learned today. Rebuilding. If you are already making changes and starting to see early results. That is it. Your age in 1 word. Nothing more. I read every single comment on this channel. Not a team. Not an automated response system. Me. And when I see those responses come in, when I see a 74-year-old type losing, and a 68-year-old type rebuilding, that tells me exactly what this community needs next. It shapes the videos I make for you. It tells me where the gaps are. It tells me who is sitting at home with the right intention and the wrong information. Your comment takes 11 seconds. It helps me help you better. And it helps the person who finds this video next week and scrolls to the comments wondering whether any of this is real, and sees someone exactly their age who felt exactly what they felt. One last thing. Think of one person in your life, a parent, a sibling, a friend, a partner, who is over 65 and has been quietly losing ground physically and doesn't understand why. Someone who is doing everything their doctor told them and still holding the railing, still pausing before they stand. Send them this video today, not tomorrow. Today. You just spent 7 minutes getting information that could genuinely change their trajectory. Passing it on costs you 30 seconds. That might be the most useful thing you do for someone you love this week. I will see you in the next one.